This year, health stories broke onto the front page with tales of deadly outbreaks and miraculous recoveries. Here to walk us through the top 5 health stories from 2011 is ABC News health editor Dan Childs. Hi, Dan. Great to see you.
Great to see you, Tanya.
You've compiled a very nice list here of the top health stories of the year. Let's start with number 5 and work our way up. All the tainted cantaloupes, tainted with listeria.
Yes, this was definitely one of the biggest stories of the year, and it was hard to pick because there were so many, but we couldn't think of one story that made more people afraid to eat breakfast than this story about this deadly listeria outbreak that hit about 28 states. In total, we just revised these numbers at the beginning of this month. 30 people lost their lives in this outbreak.
30 people. Is that one of the largest tainted food outbreaks in recent memory?
Actually, it's the largest one in U.S. history.
Wow.
That's been linked to a single pathogen and a single food. And I think one of the things that it shows so starkly is how quickly one of these outbreaks can spread across the country and affect 28 different states.
And what steps have been taken now to prevent something like this happening in the future?
Well, the FDA is always looking into ways to refine the process. They actually managed to take a look at the plant where all of these things were coming through in Southern California, and they found some of the things that might have contributed to this. But truth be told, there's still a lot of things that need to be corrected before we can completely protect ourselves against outbreaks like this one.
Absolutely. So scary. That's such a scary story. Now let's move on to something not quite as scary, but definitely affecting a large number of people. Breast cancer screening guidelines changed in 2011. It was quite controversial.
Right. It was tremendously controversial. And specifically the change was that women 50 to 74 should get their breast cancer screenings once every 2 years. And women 40 to 49 shouldn't have to worry about it. Now, these were based on a study of more than 100,000 women that found that screening this age group between 40 and 49 was not necessarily beneficial in terms of the overall population.
Now, this caused a huge uproar, though, among women who said, you know, why should I diminish the number of screenings I do?
Yes, and we actually found through asking doctors that if you ask 10 doctors about this, you're going to have 5 on each side, because some are going to say, hey, this is something that saves lives, it's absolutely necessary, and others that say this is actually, you're going to put people through unnecessary screenings, unnecessary surgery, and it's a waste of money. So
and maybe unnecessary false positives that cause then more screening and worry and the rest of it.
Entirely possible. And the women are kind of caught in the middle because everyone's wondering, what do you do now?
Right. And this is still a story that will continue into 2012, I'm sure.
We're banking on it.
Yeah, we'll continue to talk about this one. Now, next up is the drug shortages that a lot of pharmacies and drugstores faced this past year. What was behind those shortages?
Well, this was probably one of the most interesting stories that we covered this year, just because it extended all the way from February throughout the rest of the year. There were a number of hospitals that were reporting drug shortages, and these are important drugs for cancer treatment, drugs for heart conditions, some very, very high-profile drugs, 178 drugs total, that hospitals did not have enough of to treat their patients. It was a huge problem.
And why? What was to account for the shortage?
Well, the company is actually responsible for creating these drugs. In some cases, there were production lags. In some cases, because there were generics out on the market, it no longer became profitable for the companies to produce these drugs. They were actually operating at a loss.
So then the generics couldn't keep pace with the demand?
Correct, or they didn't even sell in the United States. So all this culminated in this big problem where even some of the middlemen for these drugs were actually price gouging. There were some reports of price gouging where they were charging hospitals much more than what these medicines were worth.
Now, is this problem continuing, or has it been resolved at this point?
As of right now, it still continues. The FDA actually President Obama signed an executive order that gave the FDA more oversight in terms of what needed to be done to solve this. But for right now, this is no longer, this isn't solved yet, and this is probably something that's going to be reported next year.
Another ongoing story into 2012, that's right. Now, of course, there was the devastating tsunami that hit Japan in March, and of course that has caused lasting fear over the radiation that could still be affecting Japan and possibly even a wider area. Tell us more about this story.
Well, I think the alarm bells really went up for people in the United States when they started detecting very, very small trace amounts in milk that was produced on the West Coast. Now, we actually did the math, and we found out that you would need to drink something like a tanker truck and a half worth of this milk to approach the threshold.
Right.
But whenever you say radiation, people get very, very concerned about that, and it's understandable. We're taught to fear.
Sure, and it's a cumulative thing. A little bit of radiation in your milk, add to that X-ray you had to get for your teeth, add to whatever. I mean, you know, radiation doesn't go away. It never leaves your body. Right,
and it's something that certainly got a lot of people worried. A lot of people were looking for the potassium iodide tablets. If you recall when these radiation fears were first coming up.
Absolutely. Again, this will be a story I'm sure we'll continue to follow with interest. Now, lastly, our #1 story of the year was the miraculous recovery of Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords. What an inspiring story.
This one was far and away one of the most fascinating stories of the entire year. It started at the beginning of the year with the actual shooting and her unlikely survival from that, and it was a story about traumatic brain injury, the idea that you could actually sustain this type of injury and survive. But the questions as to her recovery were very much in the air. As we saw when Diane Sawyer interviewed her most recently, she's made an amazing recovery.
Yes.
It's been incredible, and it brings in so many different health topics, one of which is music therapy, because she uses singing to try to get her speech back. It's really amazing, and it's going to be amazing to see what happens next.
It truly is. Dan Childs, thank you so much for all of that.
Thank you.